The wind scratched at the canyon's edge like a hungry coyote, howling through the bones of the desert. Dust swirled low across the cracked earth, clinging to the boots of the lone figure riding slow toward the horizon. His name was Silas Ward. Few remembered it anymore, fewer still dared speak it. He'd once been a lawman before the badge rusted and the law forgot its meaning. Now he rode for no one. Not justice, not revenge, just forward. The sun hung low, bleeding gold across the sky when he spotted the cabin half sunken into the slope of the ridge, leaning like a drunk too proud to fall. Smoke curled thin from the chimney, the kind that whispered warmth, not trouble, but he knew better than to trust the quiet. Quiet had teeth. He dismounted slow, hand resting near the revolver slung low on his hip. No movement, not from the curtain, not from the porch. The Murray snorted. He stepped up, boots creaking on warped wood. Knocked once. No answer. Then again. The door cracked open an inch. A girl's voice came from the dark, no tremble in it. No welcome either. Who are you? Silas didn't speak right away. He tilted his hat back so she could see his eyes. Thirsty traveler, he said, not looking for trouble. Trouble don't need looking for, the girl answered. It finds you when it's ready, he nodded. Ain't that the truth? She opened the door wider then, young, maybe 17, rifle in hand, but she held it like someone who'd used it before. Behind her, an oil lamp flickered over a room too bare to be lived in. The floor was swept. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of dry goods. Everything neat, too neat. Like a place waiting for something to happen. She stepped aside without a word. He walked in, slow, careful. The air smelled like wood smoke and cinnamon. On the table, a tin cup sat half filled with black coffee gone. Cold? You alone? He asked. She didn't answer. Just motioned to the chair. He sat. She stood by the hearth, arms crossed, studying him like a snake she hadn't decided to kill yet. Name's Silas, he said. Didn't come to steal or lie? Then what did you come for? She asked. Her voice had a cut to it. Not sharp like anger, dull like grief. He looked into the fire. Somewhere to wait out the night. And maybe a place that don't ask questions. She watched him a moment longer. Then turned to pour another cup of coffee. Her hands were steady, but her shoulders weren't. My name's Clara, she said finally. My pa built this place. He's gone now. Silas didn't ask where. Dead or disappeared made no difference out here. Both left the same kind of silence. He nodded, took the cup. You're young to be alone. She didn't answer. The wind howled. Outside, something in the room shifted. Then, a weight that hadn't been there before. Like they both knew the next part of the conversation had sharp edges. You running from something? She asked. He looked at her, then past her. Maybe I just got nowhere left to ride. She studied him again, not like a girl, like a judge. Then she said, You can sleep in the barn? Ain't much, but it's dry. He stood, nodded once. That'll do. There's water in the trough. Don't let the Murray drink too fast. She colic. He looked at her with something close to respect. You know horses? I know what survives out here and what doesn't. He stepped out into the night, the door closing soft behind him. In the dark, the stars blinked awake. Somewhere far off, a coyote called to nothing. In the barn, he lay down in the hay, but sleep didn't come. He stared up at the rafters and thought about the scar on the girl's collarbone, half hidden by her blouse, and the way her eyes didn't flinch when she talked about being alone. He wondered what story that silence carried, but he didn't ask, not yet. Outside, the wind shifted, brought with it the smell of horses. Not his, not hers, many, close. The first hoofbeat came like a whisper on gravel, soft but wrong. Silas sat up slow, hand slipping instinctively to the revolver beside him. The Murray was already awake, ears pinned, muscles taut. Her unease confirmed what he'd felt in his gut. He crossed the barn in 3 long steps, eased the door open a sliver. Moonlight painted the yard in silver, the shadows thick as secrets. That's when he saw them, 4 riders just at the edge of the trees. Dark shapes, too still, too silent. They weren't passing through, they were watching. He slipped out. The back of the barn encircled wide, boots quiet in the dust. From behind the rain barrel, he could see the porch, the cabin window aglow. Clara's silhouette moved inside. Oblivious, he hissed once, a sharp sound through his teeth. She turned, eyes finding his in the dark. He pointed toward the trees. Her face tightened. She moved without panic, shuddering the lamp. Darkness swallowed. The cabin, the riders didn't move, like they were waiting. Or daring. Silas returned to the barn, saddled Damari without a word. Then he walked back to the house, knocked once. The door opened an inch. Clara held the rifle low, but her grip was solid. "How many?" she whispered. "4 I can see, more maybe." "You know them?" He shook his head. "No, but they know you. Or they're about to." Clara's jaw clenched. She stepped back, letting him in. He scanned the room again, noticed the knife under the table, the extra shells tucked behind the flour tin. This girl was ready for war. "You expecting someone?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "There was a man. Name was Hatch. My pa did business with him once. Whiskey, furs, I don't know. But Hatch wanted more, wanted the cabin, the land. My father told him no, so Hatch came back with men." Silas's face hardened. "Your father?" "Shot through the door," she said flatly. "I'd buried him behind the barn. Hatch said he'd come back when I saw sense." Silas exhaled slow. "And tonight's that night." Clara nodded. Then softer, "I didn't think he'd wait this long." "Men like him don't forget land, especially when it has water." He crossed the room, pulled back the curtain an inch. The riders were closer now. One of them lit a lantern and swung it slow back and forth. "A signal. They're gonna try and talk first," Silas said. "Like wolves sniffing the fence. And then? Depends how we answer." She moved to the window, rifle cradled against her chest. "You could leave," she said without looking at him. "This ain't your fight." Silas looked at her like she'd just spoken a language he didn't recognize. "If it was just me, I'd be gone already, but now it's you. And that makes it different." Outside, a voice rang out, low and slick. "Clara, girl. That you in there? It's me. Hatch, come to settle up." She didn't flinch, didn't move, just said, "You come any closer, you'll bleed." Silence, then laughter, hollow and mean. "Still got that fire, huh? Good, I like a challenge. But I ain't here to kill nobody. Just want what's mine. Ain't right for a girl to sit on land like this all alone." Silas stepped to the door. "She's not alone." Another silence. Longer this time. "You're the drifter, huh? Heard about you. Thought you'd passed through town and out the other side. Guess I was wrong." "You were," Silas said. "Now you got till the count of 5 to turn around and ride, or what? Or I stopped counting." Behind the door, Clara loaded another shell into her rifle. Her hands didn't shake. Silas began to count. 1, outside, leather creaked. 2, a rider shifted in his saddle. 3, Hatch's voice lost its smirk. "Now hold on." 4, the night held its breath. The 5th count never came. Because that's when the first shot split the dark. The shot cracked like a whip, lighting the darkness with sudden fury. A bullet shattered the porch rail inches from Silas's knee. He dropped to the floor, rolled behind the table. Clara was already at the window, the rifle's muzzle glowing with fire as she returned the shot. A scream followed, distant but real. One of the riders had fallen, no time to count who. More gunfire exploded into the night. Wood splintered. The door shook on its hinges. Silas cursed under his breath, leaned out and fired twice into the tree line. "They're flanking," he shouted, left and right. Clara didn't respond, just moved to the opposite window and fired again. Her aim was clean, practiced. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. He crawled to the corner, yanked the extra box of shells from beneath the stove, tossed it her way. "How many you think are left?" she asked. 3, maybe 4? "You always this lucky?" "Only when someone wants me dead." The windows glowed again, brief flashes of light as more shots came. Silas ducked, glass shattering above him. The air filled with dust, smoke, and that iron scent of danger. Then silence, long enough to breathe, long enough to worry. Clara whispered, "They're moving." He nodded. "They'll push the back." They both rose. She took the kitchen, he took the barn side. And then came the footsteps, soft, deliberate crunches in the dirt. Silas steadied his breath, waited, and then the door behind him burst inward. A shape lunged through. Silas fired. Point blank. The man hit the floor with a grunt, his pistol sliding across the boards. Clara screamed her side too. He turned, saw her grappling with a shadow in the dark, her rifle knocked from her grasp. Silas didn't aim, he dove, tackled. The man off her slammed his fist into the attacker's jaw once, twice. The man sagged like wet rope. Clara scrambled to her feet, grabbed the rifle again. "You okay?" he asked, breathing hard. She nodded. "You? Not dead?" "Then we're ahead." They stood still, weapons up, breaths shallow. Outside, the hooves retreated, fast. "They're leaving," Clara said. No, Silas replied, voice hard. They're regrouping. And he was right. From the dark came Hatch's voice again, ragged and furious. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I got 6 more men riding hard from the South Ridge. You've got minutes, maybe less. Just give me the land and I'll let you walk. Clara stared at the floor, jaw tight. It Anne? Just land. Silas looked at her. Then we fight. We can't hold the cabin. No, he said. But maybe we don't have to. What are you thinking? He turned toward the hearth. His eyes locked on the support beam, thick, old, and dry as tinder. You ever heard of a fire break? Her eyes widened. You want to burn it down? They want the cabin. Let them take ashes. For a moment she hesitated, eyes scanning the room. The table where her father had carved his name. The shelf of jars, the window with the bullet hole. Then she nodded once. I'll get the lamp oil. Together they worked fast. Soaked the corners. Stacked the chairs near the walls. Every move deliberate. As Clara knelt beside the stove, lighting the last match, she looked up at Silas. If we do this, we don't get to turn back. He looked out the window shadows, moving fast across the moonlight. Good, I got nothing left to return to. The fire caught fast. Flames licked the walls, greedy and bright. The smoke climbed, thick and unforgiving. Silas grabbed Clara's arm, yanked the back door open. Run, he said. They bolted into the dark, the fire behind them roaring like thunder in a canyon. They didn't stop running. Not when the cabin exploded behind them. Not when Hatch's scream echoed into the flames. Not even when the shooting stopped. Because some fights you win not by killing, but by leaving nothing to take. The prairie swallowed them in silence once more, save for the distant crackle of burning timber and the occasional pop of splitting beams behind them. Clara didn't look back. Her breath came in tight bursts, but her feet moved steady, trained. By hardship, not hope. Silas led them through a dry wash half-choked with brush, his moray trailing behind, ears still flicking from the chaos. They crested a low ridge as the first hints of dawn smeared pink across the sky. Below, a shallow arroyo cut the land in two, bordered by mesquite and old bones of cattle long dead. They stopped there, safe, for the moment. Silas slumped beside. A boulder, chest heaving. Clara dropped to her knees, hands trembling for the first time. That was my home, she said quietly. Not angry, not weeping, just the plain weight of loss. I know, he said. I've lost mine twice. She didn't ask. How? They sat in silence, dawn stretching thin and gold across the land. Smoke drifted behind them, a faint column rising over the ridgeline like a signal to gods that never came. After a while, Clara asked, Do you think he's dead? Silas shook his head. Men like Hatch don't die easy, but they bleed. She ran, her fingers through the dust, eyes distant. What now? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, surveyed the open plains. We ride west? There's a canyon 2 days out. Water, shelter, place to disappear for a while. We rest there, then we figure it out. Clara nodded. No protest, no fear. She looked older in the new light. Not in years, but in the way fire scours the bark from a tree and leaves the grain exposed. As they packed what little they had, Silas noticed her wrap a leather cord around her wrist. A simple braid of rawhide. That from your father? He asked. She nodded. He wore it during the war. Said it reminded him to fight for what stayed behind. Smart man, Silas said. Yeah, but not invincible. They mounted the Murray together, Clara in front, Silas holding the reins behind. The horse moved steady, hooves soft against the parched earth. For a time they rode without speaking. Then, as the sun rose higher, she turned her head slightly. Why did you stay? At the cabin? At all. You could have walked. Let Hatch have it. Silas took a long breath. The land stretched empty in. All directions. I was tired of leaving things broken. You stood your ground. That's worth standing with. She didn't answer, but she leaned back slightly into him. Just enough. He didn't move. Didn't say a word. But somewhere in that quiet stretch of roadless country, between the flames behind them and the wild ahead, something unspoken settled into place. Not love. Not yet. But something stronger than distance and lighter than fate. Trust. And in the west, trust was rarer than gold. They reached the canyon by nightfall, a red gold wound in the earth carved deep by time and water. Silence clung to its walls like moss, old and knowing. Silas guided the mare down the narrow trail, one hand steady on Clara's waist as the horse picked its way along the ledge. At the bottom, they found it. A hollow carved beneath the overhang, shielded from wind and hidden from sight. Someone had been there before years ago, maybe decades. A broken fire ring, a rusted tin plate, the faint echo of another life. "We'll stay here," Silas said, voice low. "Till the trail behind us cools," Clara nodded. She slid from the saddle without a word, moved stiffly to the stone wall, and sat. Her body was still, but her eyes weren't. They searched the canyon, the sky, the smoke in her memory. "I keep hearing the fire," she said, "even when it's not there." Silas crouched nearby, gathering dry brush for kindling. That sound never leaves, but it fades." He struck a match, lit the fire low, careful not to let the flame jump too high. "Just warmth, not light." "You think Hatch lived?" she asked again. "If he did," Silas said, "he'll come harder next time. Then we should keep moving." "Not yet." She looked at him, eyes sharp. "You planning something?" "I'm waiting." "For what?" "A reason," he said, "to stop running." They sat like that, fire between them, breath sinking with the hush of wind through stone. Later, Clara curled against the canyon wall, wrapped in the Murray's saddle blanket. Silas sat watch, shotgun across his lap, eyes scanning the ridgeline. The stars above were cold and sharp as cut glass. He didn't sleep. At dawn, Clara stirred, rubbing grit from her eyes. "You watch all night?" He nodded. "Didn't seem right to rest." "You always carry guilt like that?" He gave a faint smile. "Only since the war." She stood slowly, joints stiff. "You ever kill a man who didn't deserve it?" His eyes didn't flinch, more than once. "And now?" "Now I try to balance the scale." She stared at him a moment longer, then turned to the fire, warming her hands. "We're not done with Hatch." "No," Silas said. "But we'll choose the ground next time, not him." They spent the day in the canyon, gathering wood, checking water, mending the Murray's loose shoe with wire. Clara moved like someone born to hard places, hands calloused, eyes measuring every detail. That night, Silas carved a notch into a flat piece of pine. "What's that for?" she asked. "Days we survive," he said. "I keep track." She ran her fingers over the first cut. "Feels like more than one already." "It always does." They shared coffee boiled bitter in the coals. She laughed once, soft and sudden. He looked up. "What?" "It's terrible," she said, sipping again. "But it's warm," he smiled. "I make better stew, when there's time." "Guess I'll wait and see." "You planning on staying that long?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Just looked up at the stars then." Back at him. "If you're not running," she said, "maybe I don't have to either." The fire snapped, throwing sparks into the night. Silas nodded once. No promises. Just a shared breath in a quiet canyon, the kind of silence that felt less like an end, more like the beginning of something neither of them had dared to want. The next morning brought stillness, the kind that hung heavy in the ribs and made a man feel watched even when he wasn't. Silas rose before the sun, his boots soft on stone, eyes sweeping the canyon rim. Nothing, not yet. Clara remained asleep, curled under the saddle blanket, one hand resting near her rifle like it had grown there. He watched her for a moment, the way her brow twitched in sleep, as if the fire still chased her in dreams. He knew that kind of sleep, the kind you woke from without rest. When she stirred, she didn't speak right away, just sat up, brushed the dust from her sleeves, and looked toward the canyon mouth. "I had a dream," she said. "My father was sitting by the hearth, sharpening his knife like he always did. Only this time he looked at me and said, 'Don't flinch, Clara. The world already does that for you.'" Silas didn't speak. He just tossed a stick on the fire. "He was a good man?" "He wasn't afraid of dying, only of being forgotten." She stood, shouldered the rifle. "I won't let that happen." He nodded once. "Then we start writing a new trail." They packed what little they had and rode north along the riverbed, following an old trading path Silas had once used when he wore a deputy star, back before. The uniform became a target. Back before justice had a price tag. By midday they found tracks, not fresh, but not old either. Wagon ruts, 2 horses, 1 barefoot rider. "Scouts," Silas muttered. "You think they're Hatch's men?" "Maybe, and if not, we stay quiet anyway." They turned west, cutting across the salt flat where the wind spoke louder than any voice. Hours passed in sun and silence. Clara didn't ask questions, and Silas didn't offer answers. They moved like shadows, eyes always on the horizon. That night, they made camp beneath a stand of juniper. As Clara tended the fire, Silas pulled a small oilskin pouch from his saddlebag and laid it between them. "What's that?" she asked. "A map," he said, "of the land before the railroads changed it." She unrolled it, eyes scanning. The hand-drawn trails, old mining claims, rivers that no longer flowed. "Where did you get this?" "From a man who died wishing he'd gone back home." She looked up. "Where's home for you?" "Nowhere anymore." Her voice was quiet when she said, "Then maybe here's a start." They sat close that night, not touching, but near enough to share warmth. Wind moved through the trees above, like a lullaby played on broken strings. "If Hatch is alive," she whispered, "he won't stop." "No," Silas said. "But next time he'll bleed more than pride." She smiled faintly. "You talk like someone who's already killed him in your mind." "I have. Doesn't that make you like him?" "No," he said, voice low. "Because I waited until he gave me a reason." And in the canyon shadows, beneath stars too old to care, Clara closed her eyes again. But this time, when sleep came, it came without fire. They reached Cross Timber on the fourth morning, a town barely hanging on by its nails, with buildings that leaned like drunkards and windows patched with more dust than glass. The sign over the saloon door had lost half its letters, and the sheriff's office looked more abandoned than the jail it guarded. Silas dismounted first, eyes scanning. Every rooftop, every alley. "You know this place?" Clara asked. "Used to," he muttered. "Years back. Friends here?" "No, just debts." She didn't press. They tied the mare behind the livery and entered town on foot, hats low, steps even. The few folks on the street watched them with the kind of interest that only comes from boredom and suspicion. At the general store, Silas bought jerky, 2 cans of beans, and a fresh box of shells. The clerk didn't speak, just stared at the star-shaped scar near Silas's wrist. Outside, Clara studied a notice board nailed to the wall. "Look," she said, her voice was tight. There was a poster worn, sun-faded, but clear enough. "Wanted, Silas Ward, dead or alive, $400. "That's your face," she whispered. "More. Or less. You didn't tell me. Didn't see the point." She stared at him. "Why'd they want you dead?" "Because I arrested the wrong man and let the right ones hang themselves." He reached up, tore the poster free, folded it, and tucked it into his coat. "Come on, we won't stay long." They headed for the saloon. Inside, the place smelled of stale beer and secrets. A piano sat untouched in the corner, and the barkeep, an old man with one good eye and a scarred lip, froze when he saw Silas. "Well?" the man rasped. "Ghosts don't usually drink whiskey." Silas didn't blink. "Don't need to. Just came for words." "Then speak 'em quick," the man said. "Some ears here still work fine." Silas stepped to the bar. "Looking for Hatch? You hear anything? Hatch?" The name hung like smoke. "Thought he was dead." "He isn't." "Then I heard wrong?" Silas leaned in. "Don't lie, Mason, not with her watching." Mason glanced at Clara, then back at Silas. "All right, he came through here." 2 days ago? Left with 4 men. Headed north toward Raven's Hollow. "He say what for?" "Didn't have to." He was grinning like a man who thought revenge was a horse that finally came back home. Silas nodded once, slid a coin across the counter. "For your honesty?" "Hell," Mason muttered. "I just bought myself a war, didn't I?" They left without another word. Outside, the sky had dimmed, clouds rolling over the hills like bruises. "Raven's Hollow?" Clara asked. "Old mining camp. Abandoned. Good place for men like Hatch to dig themselves in." "So what's the plan?" Silas mounted the mare, then offered her a hand. "We ride. We watch. And when he makes the first mistake?" She climbed up behind him. "We end it?" "No," he said. "We finish it." And with that they turned toward the hills, where the wind whispered promises only the broken could hear and only the brave dared answer. They reached the outskirts of Raven's Hollow just before dusk, where the hills dipped low and the trees grew tighter, like the land itself wanted to keep secrets. The camp was a skeleton now, collapsed mine shafts, rusted tracks, and cabins chewed hollow by time. But smoke curled from one of the chimneys, too clean to be old. Hatch was there. Silas crouched on a ridge above the hollow, spyglass in hand. "3 on watch," he said. 2 rifles, 1 shotgun. 4th man inside, maybe more. Clara knelt beside him, eyes hard. "You sure it's him?" "Saw his boots. Only one bastard I've known who wore snake hide in the mud." "So, what now? Wait till dark?" "No," Silas said. "We make them think they've already won." They rode down slowly, just before full nightfall, hands raised, weapons slung but visible. A bold move, risky, but sometimes bait walks itself into the trap and dares it to spring. The guards froze as they approached. One shouted, "Hold it!" Silas reined in. "Tell Hatch it's Silas, Ward. I've come to settle accounts." The man blinked, then ran toward the cabin. Silence fell. Clara glanced at Silas. "You sure this is smart?" "Not even a little." Moments later, the door swung open. Hatch stepped out like a preacher on Sunday, arms wide, grin shining in the firelight. "Well, I'll be damned. You do got a death wish. Just tired of looking over my shoulder." Hatch walked closer, flanked by two men with twitchy hands and blood in their eyes. "I heard about your little bonfire," he said. "Real shame. That was good timber." "You torched the soul of that place a long time ago," Clara said. "Voice even?" Hatch raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think you'd still be breathing, girl." "That's your second mistake," she said. "First was underestimating what I'm willing to burn." Hatch's smile faded. "You come to trade, Ward, or beg?" "Neither," Silas said. "I came to offer a choice." "Choice?" "Walk away. Leave this land and you live." The men around Hatch chuckled. Hatch didn't. He stepped closer. "You really think you can bluff me with that half-shot scattergun and a girl?" Silas looked calm. "I don't bluff." And then came the sound, low, sudden, and rising fast. Hoofbeats, dozens, thunder rolling in from the southern ridge. Clara turned first. "Who?" But Silas already knew. "Mason," he said, "the bartender?" "No, former cavalry scout." Hatch spun toward the ridge, eyes wide. His hired guns fumbled for rifles, but it was too late. Riders burst from the tree line, 6 of them, armed, fast, and angry. Hatch's men scattered like dry leaves. The camp exploded in chaos. Silas dismounted and drew. Clara did the same. Hatch fired first, missed. Silas didn't. One shot caught Hatch in the thigh, another in the shoulder. He dropped, screaming, blood blooming through his shirt. Clara stood over him, rifle aimed. "Steady. I should kill you," she said. Hatch gritted his teeth. "Then do it." "No," she said. "Dying would let you off too easy." Silas walked up, reloaded slow. "You'll be dragged into town, stitched up just enough to hang straight." Hatch spat blood. "You think you're righteous, Ward?" "No," Silas said. "Just done running." Behind them, the dust settled. The riders circled the hollow, cleaning up what was left of Hatch's crew. Mason approached, breath short but grinning. "Told you I'd ride if the pay was right." "Didn't pay you anything?" Silas said. "I know," Mason winked. "But I hate that bastard more than I love whiskey." Clara stepped away from Hatch, eyes scanning the hollow. "It's over, almost," Silas said. And in that moment, with the night deepening around them and the canyon echoing with the last cries of fallen men, they both understood. Wasn't just the end of a chase. It was the beginning of their own claim on peace. They stayed in Raven's Hollow through the night, long enough to bind wounds and bury the dead. Hatch was tied to a post with blood crusting around the bandages, on his shoulder and leg. He didn't speak again, not to Clara, not to Silas, not to anyone. His eyes held something broken now, not pain, not rage, but the kind of emptiness that follows a man when he runs out of people to blame. At sunrise, Mason brewed coffee over a low fire while Silas checked the saddlebags. "We'll ride for Jasper's Crossing," Silas said. "Marshall's still got a holding cell there." "Hatch won't talk his way out of this one," Mason nodded. "That Marshall still owe you for saving his boy?" "He better," Silas muttered. Clara sat apart from them, watching the wind twist through the hollow. Her fingers traced the worn edge of the rawhide braid on her wrist. When Silas joined her, she didn't turn. "I thought I'd feel something," she said. "After all." "This, you do," he replied. "It just takes time to recognize it. I thought revenge would fill the hole." "It doesn't," he said quietly, "but it gives you space to plant something new." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Do you ever stop expecting the worst?" "Not really," he said with a half-smile. "But sometimes you start hoping anyway." They rode out by mid-morning, a slow line of dust trailing behind them. Mason took point with 2 of his riders flanking Hatch's wounded horse. Clara and Silas brought up the rear. The sky was wide and the wind was soft. By afternoon, they reached a split in the Trail 1 road led north to Jasper's Crossing. The other veered west toward open plains and pine-thick highlands. Clara pulled her horse to a stop. "I don't have to go?" she said. "To the crossing?" Silas turned to her. "You don't, but the marshal should hear your side. That land was yours. He won't care." Then we make him care? She looked down the western trail. There's a place past those hills. My father talked about it once. Said there was water, wildflowers in the spring. A place where nothing chased you. Sounds like a dream, Silas said. It was, she replied. But maybe it doesn't have to be, he followed her gaze. The trail west disappeared into a line of pines that looked like they belonged to a different world entirely. You could ride that way, he said. And what about you? I gave my word, he said. Hatch sees a courtroom before he sees a rope. Then you find me after? Her voice was quiet but certain. If I can. She smiled, small and real. You will. Then, without another word, she pressed her heels into her horse and rode west. Silas watched until the trees swallowed her. He turned back to the trail and nudged his moray forward. Hatch groaned behind him, but Silas didn't look back. His eyes were already on the horizon and on the road that might lead him back to something he didn't know he needed until now. The road to Jasper's Crossing was long and silent. Dust rose with every hoofbeat, curling behind the group like smoke from a dying fire. Hatch slumped in his saddle, wrists tied, face pale from blood loss and pride. Mason rode beside him, one hand always near his holster. The others spoke little. They all knew this part wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, the slow kind that didn't come with glory, just a hard ride and the weight of doing what was right. Silas rode at the front now, eyes fixed on the line where the land met the sky. His thoughts drifted like leaves in a current always circling back to Clara. He saw her in flashes, hair tied back in the wind, rifle in her hands, fire in her voice. She wasn't just a survivor, she was something sharper, something steadier. He'd met 100 hard men who broke under less than what she carried. But she hadn't flinched. They reached the edge of Jasper's Crossing by late morning. A weathered sign marked the town's name in cracked white paint, half swallowed by ivy. Children paused their games to watch the riders roll in. The sheriff's office stood at the far end of the street, next to the blacksmith and an old church that had long forgotten its songs. Silas dismounted and marched Hatch straight to the door. Marshal Irving looked up from his desk, boots crossed, pipe in his teeth. His mustache twitched when he saw Silas. Well, hell, Irving said. Didn't think I'd see you again. Last I heard you were dead. Silas shoved Hatch forward. Not yet. And I brought you something better than a ghost. Irving stood, eyes widening. He saw Hatch. Is that? Elias Hatch, Silas confirmed. Wanted in 3 counties. Tried to kill a girl for her land. Burned half a ridge trying to silence her. He doesn't walk free again. Irving nodded slowly. No, he doesn't. He signaled 2 deputies who dragged Hatch to the cells without ceremony. The man didn't speak, just groaned once, then fell quiet. Outside, the sky darkened slightly with the first signs of a storm. Mason clapped Silas on the back. Guess you did your part. For now. You heading west? Silas paused. Yeah, Mason grinned. You've got that look, like someone with something left to find. Maybe I do, Silas said. Maybe. She's already waiting. He left town before the storm broke. Alone now, but not empty. The land rolled wide and green ahead, hills softened by distance, clouds casting long shadows like memories drifting across the plains. He didn't rush. He followed the trail she took, clover growing along the edges, old wagon tracks barely visible in the grass. Each mile felt lighter, as if something had been shed with every step. By sundown, he reached a bluff overlooking a valley brimming with wildflowers, just like she said. A small cabin stood near a creek, smoke rising from its chimney. And there, on the porch, sat Clara, feet bare, rifle resting beside her, and eyes fixed on the horizon like she'd been waiting all along. She didn't rise, didn't call out, just smiled. And Silas smiled back, because sometimes the West didn't give you peace, but if you earned it and bled for it and rode far enough, it gave you a place to begin again. 3 winters had passed since the fire at Raven's Hollow. 3 winters since Silas Ward rode west and never looked back. The land had changed, greener in places, harsher in others, but not as much as the man who rode across it now. His coat was older, patched at the shoulder, and his beard had gone to gray along the chin, but his eyes hadn't dulled. If anything, they saw clearer. Beside him, Clara rode tall in the saddle, rifle slung across her back, a scarf tied around her neck to shield against dust. She was no longer the girl who guarded a cabin alone. She was something more now. Not just survivor, not just fighter, partner. They called their place Elder Ridge. A stretch of land tucked beneath the bluffs with a wide river and enough grass for 20 horses. They'd built it with their hands, cabin, fence, barn, everything. Folks from nearby settlements rode in for medicine, for supplies, sometimes just for the silence. Word had spread. The couple at Elder Ridge weren't lawmen, but they knew how to end trouble. And now, trouble had found them again. Came with a rider dust, covered, bleeding, and barely holding his seat. Silas saw him from the porch, galloping hard and lopsided, as if death was chasing close behind. The rider collapsed before he could speak, a bullet in his side and a burn across his arm. Clara reached him first. She pressed cloth to his wound, but it was Silas who heard the whisper through the man's cracked lips. Riders, Iron Cross. They're coming. They took who? Silas asked. The man's eyes fluttered. A town, north of Pine Creek, all of it. Women, children, gone. Clara went still. Silas met her eyes. They didn't need to speak. This wasn't bandits. This wasn't petty revenge. This was something bigger, something organized. The Iron Cross. It was a symbol they both knew. One that hadn't been seen in years, not since the war ended. Silas stood slowly. Get the Winchester ready. Saddle the bay mare. We ride by nightfall. Clara nodded. You think it's him? If it is, Silas said, voice low, he's not wearing a badge anymore. He's wearing a crown. Behind them, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke from a town already gone. And in the hills ahead, the silence was not peace. It was the breath before war. They buried the rider before sundown, near the edge of the ridge beneath the old cottonwood. No name to carve, just a smooth stone marked with a simple cross and a silence that carried more weight than eulogies ever could. Clara stood with her hat pressed to her chest, face hard, but her eyes red-rimmed with fury barely held back. They didn't just kill him, she said. They made sure he'd bring the message first. Silas nodded. That kind of cruelty is a signature same bastard I knew in Kansas. Back then they called him Lieutenant Granger. And now? She asked. Now they call him Judge. Clara didn't flinch. Then let's deliver the sentence. By nightfall they were riding north through a sea of moonlit grass and wind that howled like a warning. The air turned colder the further they rode, and the land shifted more barren, dotted with charred timber and burnt-out wagons like bones picked clean. Silence had its own sound out here, and it wasn't the kind that brought peace. Just the kind that asked questions without expecting answers. They reached the outskirts of Pine Creek by dawn. What was left of it, anyway. The town had been stripped to the ribs. Doors torn from hinges, roofs caved in by fire, wagons overturned and looted. Blood stained the dirt, but no bodies remained. Only boot prints, wagon tracks, and a single black iron cross hammered into the center post of the old livery stable. Clara dismounted, fingers trembling as she touched the rusted metal. This isn't a raid. It's a message. Worse, Silas said. It's recruitment. From behind the charred saloon wall, a shape moved. Silas spun, gun drawn. Hold, a voice rasped. An old man stepped into view, arms raised, face half-shadowed by soot and sorrow. I'm not with them, he said. I hid. In the root. Cellar? 2 days now. Clara stepped forward. Did you see where they went? The man nodded. North. Into the Red Rock Pass, wagons full, dozens, maybe more. How many fighters? Silas asked. Hard to say. Some wore blue coats. Some didn't, but they moved like soldiers. Clean, quiet, merciless. Silas holstered his gun. You're safe now? Head south? Tell anyone you see not to follow that trail. Why? The old man asked. What's waiting up there? Silas stared into the north, jaw set. A ghost that forgot how to die. They rode hard through Red Rock Pass by mid-afternoon. The trail narrowed, the walls rising on either side like a throat ready to swallow them whole. It was there, at the highest bend, that Clara saw the Sina-child's rag doll nailed to a tree. Its face blackened with soot dots. She said nothing, just drew her rifle and pushed her horse forward, because whatever waited at the end of this trail had made one mistake. It had left them alive. The path twisted tighter the deeper they rode into Red Rock Pass, the canyon walls closing in like the jaws of a waiting beast. Light barely reached the trail, now just fractured beams cutting through stone as if the sun itself didn't dare come too close. The only sound was the echo of hooves and the soft creak of leather as Clara shifted in the saddle, her eyes never leaving the trail ahead. Silas pulled them to a stop at a bend near a bluff where a sheer drop split the trail in two. From here, the valley below stretched wide and empty until Clara's sharp eyes spotted the movement. A line of wagons, maybe a dozen, rolling north between two ridges, guarded at least 20 men on horseback. Two banners fluttered from the lead wagon, one plain red, the other marked with that same black iron cross. Looks like they've got prisoners, Clara whispered, raising the spyglass. 3 wagons in the middle, canvas covered. Can't tell how many inside. Silas took the glass, his jaw clenched. They're not moving fast. They want to be seen. This is a parade, not a retreat. So they think no one's coming, Clara said. Then they're about to get surprised. Silas traced the ridgeline with his finger. There's a narrow cut through those rocks. If we can reach it before they clear the ridge, we could be above them. 2 of us against 20, Clara asked. Not yet, Silas said. But we watch, we learn, and when we strike, we don't miss. They stashed the horses beneath an overhang and climbed the ridge on foot, rifles strapped to their backs, hands scraping stone as they pulled themselves higher. The wind picked up, colder here, carrying with it the faint sound of boots, wheels, and a distant chantman's voices, low and rhythmic. Like a hymn dragged through mud. They reached the top just as the caravan rolled below. From this high, Clara could see everything. The lead rider wore a black duster and rode a pale horse. His face was clean-shaven, but his eyes were wrung, too calm, too dead. He raised one gloved hand and the entire column stopped as one. That him? Clara asked. Granger? Silas didn't answer. He was already aiming down the rifle scope. His breath slowed, his finger tensed, but he didn't fire. No, he said, it's not him, not yet, that's a proxy. Then where's the judge? Waiting, letting his dog sniff out the danger first. From below, the pale horseman suddenly turned his head upward. Toward them, Silas ducked back. He saw us. No way from that angle, Clara said. Unless he was looking for us. Silas finished. The first shot tore through the ledge where Clara had been seconds before, spraying rock and dust into the air. A sniper, hidden, waiting. Go, Silas shouted. They scrambled down the back of the ridge as bullets ripped into the stone above. The whole ambush had been turned on its head. They weren't hunting the caravan. The caravan had baited them. They reached the horses and rode hard, weaving between boulders and low brush, hearts pounding. The echo of gunfire faded behind them, replaced by a sound far worse: horns, short, sharp blasts. Organized. Clara looked back once, face grim. They were ready for us, Silas nodded. Which means Granger already knows we're coming. And he's not running. No, Silas said. He's calling us in. Ahead, the trail split 3 ways. South led back to safety, east to the frontier. But west-west led straight into the heart of the judge's domain. Silas turned. His murray. We ride west. Clara didn't hesitate. Then let's ride hard. Because if Granger wanted a reckoning, he was about to get one. They rode into the west with the wind behind them and the weight of war ahead. The land changed again, redder now, dustier, scattered with bones of cattle and forgotten boundary markers. Old barbed wire fences cut across the hills like scars, half swallowed by earth and time. It was a place no one settled anymore. The maps didn't name it, and the law didn't reach it. This was where the judge ruled. By dusk, they reached a burned-out trading post near Dead Man's Bluff. Silas dismounted first, checking the structure for signs of movement. It was abandoned, but not untouched. Bullet holes marked the windows. Blood stained the walls inside. And someone had left a warning carved into the floorboards with a knife. Judgment falls on the faithless. Clara read it out loud, then looked to Silas. What kind of man writes scripture in blood? The kind that forgets he's still mortal, Silas muttered. They camped behind the bluff, fire kept low, backs to stone. Silas cleaned the rifle while Clara sharpened her blade in slow, precise strokes. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was focused. They'd fought men before, outlaws, raiders, killers, but this was different. The judge wasn't just building a gang, he was building a belief. He's not just hunting territory, Clara said quietly. He's trying to cleanse it. Yeah, Silas said. Of anyone who won't kneel. She looked over. You ever met him? Once. End of the war. We were ordered to torch a Confederate holdout in the southern hills. He refused. Said judgment wasn't for generals, it was for prophets. He walked away from command, took half the unit with him. We thought he died out there, but he didn't. No, Silas said. He just waited. The next morning, they followed the trail deeper into the no man's land. Strange signs appeared: skulls hung from poles, tar crosses painted on trees, and at one point, a line of boots neatly arranged in the road, all pointing west. The ground grew dry and cracked. Even the birds stopped singing. Then, near midday, they found the girl. She was maybe 12. Barefoot, dirt-smudged, standing in the road like a ghost. Clara was off her horse before it stopped moving. "Sweetheart," she called gently. "Are you hurt?" The girl didn't answer. Just held out a folded scrap of paper with shaking hands. Clara took it, opened it. A hand-drawn map, crude but clear. A line leading to a box marked with a single word: Sanctum. Silas read it and felt his stomach twist. "It's a trap." "I know," Clara said, "but it's also the way forward," he added. Clara looked at the girl. "Where are your parents?" The girl shook her head slowly, then pointed west. "Gone," she whispered. They couldn't leave her behind. So, Clara lifted her onto her horse, wrapping a blanket around her thin shoulders. Silas studied the map once more. "Sanctum's 2 days from here. If the judge is waiting there, it's because he wants us to see what he's built. Then, we let him show us," Clara said. "And when he does, we tear it to the ground," Silas finished. They set out again, 3 riders now, heading toward a place no one ever returned from. But they weren't running anymore. They were marching, straight into the lion's den with fire in their eyes and justice in their saddlebags. They moved like ghosts across the Badlands, silent and swift beneath a sky that seemed to press heavier with every mile. The girl didn't speak again, not a word, not a name. She just clung to Clara, her wide eyes locked forward like she already knew what lay ahead and had seen too much to hope for rescue. Clara held her steady, whispering things not meant to calm, but to remind, "You're safe now. You ride with us?" By the second nightfall, they reached the edge of a basin so wide and quiet it felt like stepping into a breath the land had forgotten to exhale. In the center stood a cluster of whitewashed buildings arranged in a perfect circle lit by torchlight. At the heart of the circle, a chapel, no cross on the steeple, only the black iron emblem hammered into the wood. The map had been true. They'd found the sanctum. They dismounted at a ridge overlooking the compound. Silas scanned the perimeter through the scope. Guards at every corner, rifles, clean uniforms, trained. How many? Clara asked. 20. Maybe more, but no prisoners outside. They're keeping them in the chapel. Or beneath it, Clara muttered. That's what cults do. Silas gave a humorless grunt. You think this is a cult? I think it stopped being a gang the moment he taught them to kneel. They watched for another hour, memorizing shifts, blind spots, patrol routes. Then Silas turned to the girl. You know what's behind those walls? She hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. He calls them the Chosen, she whispered. He says they'll burn the rot from the land. He reads from a book he wrote himself. Clara's voice hardened. What about your parents? The girl's jaw clenched. He judged them. That was enough. By midnight, Silas and Clara moved into position. Clara circled wide, approaching from the east where brush offered cover. Silas crept along the drainage ditch toward the rear gate. A single guard stood post there, bored and fidgeting. With his coat buttons, he never heard Silas's boots. One silent strike. One buried body. Clara timed her approach with the wind. She scaled the low fence near the storage sheds and slipped between shadows like she'd been born in them. Ahead, she spotted the side door to the chapel padlocked, but old iron. She pulled a short pribar from her belt. One pop, slow and careful. Inside. The chapel was cold. The pews were gone. Chains hung from the rafters like rotten fruit. Candles burned along the walls in a perfect circle around a stone altar stained dark from use. Atop it rested the book. Heavy, leather-bound, and marked with the iron cross. And standing beside it, waiting in the dark, the judge. He didn't turn when she entered. I wondered how long it would take, he said, voice deep, even, and disturbingly calm. You always were the one I expected to come first. Clara raised her rifle. You talk like you know me. I know what you are. Righteous, angry, predictable. He turned then tall, cloaked, face pale, but eyes sharp as nails. I offer you a seat, Clara, not a cell, a place beside me. She stepped closer, steady. You judged her parents. They were weak. You judged Pine Creek. It was lost. You judged the man we buried. He smiled faintly. He tried to run. Clara lowered the rifle half an inch. Then judge this. And fired. The Bullet struck the judge in the shoulder, spun him back. He fell behind the altar with a shout, but not silence. Alarms rang, horns blared. And suddenly the sanctum was a storm of motion. Silas burst in through the back, shotgun roaring. "Time's up, preacher?" Clara grabbed the book and lit the nearest candle to its pages. The flames leapt fast, smoke curled, thick and choking. The sanctum was burning from the inside out. And outside, the chosen scrambled in confusion, because the West had stopped, waiting for judgment. It had come to deliver its own. The flames caught quick old timber, dry parchment, years of doctrine and control gone up like prairie grass in summer lightning. Clara tossed the burning book into the altar basin where the iron cross hissed as the leather blackened and curled. Smoke poured from the chapel roof, curling into the midnight sky like a signal to anyone watching. The reckoning had begun. Silas stepped in front of her, shotgun smoking, eyes scanning the walls. "He's gone," he said. He crawled out the back, Clara growled, "like a rat. We'll find him. But first," he jerked his chin toward the floor. A hatch. She moved fast, kicking it open with her heel. A narrow stairwell spiraled into darkness, and from below voices, whispers, weeping. Clara descended first, rifle ready. The air was thick, wet with rot and damp earth. They found them 15. Souls locked behind rusted bars. Women, children, a few older men, all too thin, too broken. One boy flinched at Clara's shadow. Another woman reached for her with shaking fingers. "You're not one of them," she said. "I thought no one would come." "Well," Clara said, breaking the lock with one shot, "we did." Silas found the keys hanging on a hook near a table of tools he didn't want to look too closely at. They moved quickly, freeing the captives, helping them up the stairs as the chapel groaned above. The fire had spread to the rafters. Time was running out. Outside, chaos reigned. The chosen scattered like ants without a queen. Some threw down their weapons, others tried to form lines. But the girl, silent until now, slipped from behind the crates where Clara had hidden her, and shouted one word that cracked through the night like a whip: "Run." And they did. The prisoners spilled into the darkness, guided by Clara and Silas. The fire roared behind them. The sanctum collapsed, beam by beam, dream by dream. And still, no sign of the judge. It wasn't over. An hour later, once the last of the freed survivors were safely hidden near the riverbank grove, Clara and Silas stood together under the skeletal remains of a tree struck by lightning. Smoke still rose from the valley behind them. "He escaped," she said bitterly. Silas nodded. "Yeah, but not untouched. That wound will slow him." Clara's grip on her rifle tightened. "He won't stop." "No, but neither will we." Hush settled between them, broken only by the wind stirring the leaves above. Clara turned to the girl, who stood watching the fire from a distance, her small hands clenched into fists. "What's your name?" Clara asked softly. The girl looked up. "Juniper," Clara smiled gently. "That's a strong name." The girl didn't smile back. "He had a list," she whispered. "A ledger?" "Names of people he wanted to judge. Towns, families, you're on it." Silas and Clara exchanged a glance. "Where is it now?" Silas asked. Juniper pointed to the judge's tent, still untouched near the far ridge. "In his box, with the red seal." They moved fast. The tent was quiet, abandoned. Inside, a steel lockbox sat atop a wooden crate beside maps, coins, and 2 glass jars filled with bullets inscribed with names. Clara broke the seal and opened the box. Inside, a ledger, hand-bound, dozens of names. Dozens of towns, one circled. In Red Elder Ridge, Clara stared. "He planned to come for us all along." Silas closed the book slowly. "Then we ride first." The judge had vanished into the dark, licking his wounds, planning his return. But now Clara and Silas had the map. They had the names. They had Juniper, and they had fire in their hearts, because judgment might wear a robe, but justice rode with a rifle and a steady hand. They left the ruins of the sanctum before dawn, riding east with the first light brushing the hills in gold. Behind them, smoke curled like the last breath of a dying kingdom. Ahead of them, names, places, and a trail of ruin left by a man who once called himself a judge. He had built an empire of fear, carved from loyalty and ash. Now, Silas and Clara held his blueprint, and they intended to burn it town by town, over. The next weeks, they became more than just 2 riders. In Hollow Creek, they exposed a chosen informant in the sheriff's office. In Millstone Valley, they stopped a hanging planned in secret behind church doors. And in Fairbank Ridge, they met others people who had once knelt and now stood ready to fight. Juniper stayed close, never asking to leave. She rode like someone twice her age, scouted like she'd been born with a compass in her blood. Clara became her shadow, her protector, her teacher. And though the girl still rarely smiled, she stopped flinching at thunder. It was in Ash Hollow, a ghost settlement where every house stood abandoned but one, that they found him again. The judge. He was thinner now, paler, his arm still stiff from the wound Clara had given him, but the fire in his voice hadn't dimmed. His chosen were fewer, only 6 now, but they stood between him and the gallows he had once built for others. Silas and Clara approached in silence, rifles slung, steps slow. The judge stood on the chapel steps, hands raised like a preacher before the storm. "I knew you'd come," he said. Silas spoke calmly. "We're not here for debate," the judge smiled. "Then for vengeance?" "No," Clara said, stepping forward, "for memory." The shooting started fast, no warnings, no last rites. Silas dropped 2 before the judge reached the doorway. Clara flanked left, picked off another near the bell tower. Juniper stayed low, circling wide with a lantern, and a fuse she'd tied herself. The plan was simple, no more sermons, just silence. Within minutes, it was over. The judge crawled from the doorway, blood soaking his collar, his voice cracking into something human. "I gave them purpose," he gasped. "I gave you order." Silas leveled his rifle. "You gave them fear." Clara took his hand and lowered the weapon. "He doesn't deserve a bullet." Silas nodded. "You're right." Instead, they left him there, chained to the very pulpit he once ruled from, waiting for the townsfolk he terrorized to find him. To decide his fate, they rode west again after that, not toward war this time, but toward rebuilding. Toward Elder Ridge and the wildflower valley that still remembered their names, the book of names they'd taken from the sanctum. Burned, some stories weren't meant to be remembered, but theirs would be. Years passed. Elder Ridge grew. A small schoolhouse, a second barn, a swing tied to the old oak where Juniper practiced her aim. She laughed more now, Clara taught. Silas fixed fences. Peace, like revenge, came slow, but it stayed longer. And every time the wind picked up and rolled through the hills, folks said they could hear it, a voice soft as ash and iron, not a warning, not a judgment, just a whisper. Justice rides.